Welcome, Dr. Andrew Leber. We're going to talk a little bit about your work, and welcome.
All
So,
right.
yeah,
Hi.
I'm so excited. I want to know, I think we all want to know what it is, what got you into this business of cognitive psychology, and maybe you can share a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, what a great question. I think that had I known how my professors ended up where they got, it would illuminate the path in front of me and make me realize that it's quite a winding path in many cases. As a teenager, my parents were convinced I'd become a lawyer because I was so tenacious in my arguments with them. And although you'll find that that type of trait transfers really well to science. My friends also thought that I might be a counseling psychologist because despite me arguing with my parents a lot, I really liked to talk about their problems and try to understand, how we can navigate difficulties that we face in life. But we'll see that there's a common thread with where I ended up. But I could tell a lot of stories. I'll just tell a quick story about when I was 17 years old and I went to a shopping mall, an indoor shopping mall, which they don't have them these days like they used to. But if you were like me and you grew up in New Jersey, they were everywhere. And there was a store that opened up that was selling these posters called Magic Eye posters. And really, if you look at them, they just look like repeating patterns. You can't really see anything unless you diverge your eyes and imagine that you're staring twice the distance away from the wall where the poster is mounted. And lo and behold, something three-dimensional just pops up in your brain. You're totally hallucinating it because it's not three-dimensional. It has no depth in the real world. It's just a flat poster. And I stood in that mall for an hour staring at every single poster and trying to perceive every poster that I could until my eyes were blurry. And then I bought a poster with my hard-earned money that I didn't have much of at that age. And I got back in the car with my blurry eye vision and all, made it safely home, mounted that thing on my wall and continued to stare at it all the time. And I was confronted with this question: how is it that I'm perceiving something that isn't really there in the real world? I'm effectively hallucinating legally. And how does that happen? How does our brain allow this to happen? So the seed was planted. I can't say I decided right away I'm going to major in psychology and understand how humans perceive visual stimulation, because I didn't even know that was a psychology topic. But things happen in life, seeds get planted, and we eventually find our way to exploring the passions that drive us. I ended up taking a course with a professor named Bella Ulesh, who invented the technology to make those posters possible. What a coincidence that was. And I knew what my path in life was going to be.
Amazing. And of course, right now, and I know you well, your voice and the way you listen so attentively, I could see why your friends thought you would make a really good person to help solve problems. You have a lab, you run this cognitive control lab. Can you tell us about this and maybe what are the everyday implications?
Yeah, so cognitive control. I guess let's just ask, what is it that impresses? Why do we think we're so special? Maybe we're not special. If we think about fitness for life in this crazy world that we are in, cockroaches do just as well as we do, and perhaps better. But what is it that we think makes humans special? And we can start looking at our minds. And if we look at our senses, sight, hearing, touch, all those things, those aren't better than other animals. There are other animals that see way better than we do. Take the bald eagle. There are other animals that smell way better than we do. That are able to smell, not emit odors. But take dogs have the sense of smell that's at least 1,000,000 times better than ours, there's something different. And it's the way that we can be adaptable in different situations. So you could be in a quiet classroom taking an exam and knowing that that's not an appropriate context to just scream out, "I love the Columbus Crew." But if you're at Crew Stadium rooting for your favorite Major League Soccer team, being quiet isn't really going to help that much. And you want to be loud and you want to urge on your team and help them win. So how can we adapt ourselves to perform behaviorally relevant and socially appropriate behaviors in different contexts? And our brain enables us to do that in a way that other animals cannot do. This is the kind of stuff that we study in the lab. We study particularly how we can resist distracting information when we know that it's irrelevant. We also study how that interacts with short-term memory, or what we call working memory, and also other forms of learning.
So, absolutely.
So, your question though.
Yeah, it's very topical.
I realize I should get to the everyday.
Yeah.
I should get to the everyday implications of this, right? So, one of the things that we're really interested in is if you're using the best strategies for any given moment in life. So let's say you walk out to a parking lot to find your family's car, and the car happens to be red and large. Well, you could use different strategies to try to find that car. You could search for all red things. But what if you're in a parking lot that's filled with red cars? Well, maybe you search for big cars instead. And that's such a simple everyday choice. And the way that you make that choice can impact how rapidly you solve that task. This applies to looking for keys, if we're talking in the visual domain, but just in general, how do you choose the best strategy on an exam question? How do you choose the best strategy when choosing how to work a certain job? So let's say you're doing baggage security screening at the airport. What strategies might you use there? And is the strategy that you're choosing affecting everyone's safety? So these types of cognitive mechanisms and how they are used are somewhat underexplored in research, and the better we understand them, the better we can benefit society in a variety of ways. Just a few other implications of this work is that there are a variety of mental health disorders that we don't fully understand. And when we can, some of them we can recognize have an attentional component to them and a cognitive control component to them. And if we can understand how people in these special populations differ from our healthy average population, then we can start to understand how to treat these different disorders and how to help people function to their best capacity in everyday life.
Wow, really important implications. We talked a little bit about this already, implications for everyday life. I know you have a series of research questions that you ask.
Yeah.
And maybe you can kind of summarize those for us, and maybe tell us a little bit more of what you've been already talking about.
Yeah, so much of our life is knowing when to focus on what, and that's it in a nutshell. So as I sit here talking to you, and hopefully talking to all the people who will be listening and watching, I need to be focusing on what I'm saying. I need to be looking at my screen, and I have to resist turning my attention to a lot of other appealing things. For instance, picking up my cell phone and checking my email. That's something that people do hundreds of times a day, but we know that despite the strong impulse we have and how rewarding it feels to do that, there are times in which it's not appropriate. Right outside my window, I have a really nice tree where birds and other kinds of wildlife, like squirrels, come to climb all over that tree. And if I see a cardinal land right there, I could like jump over to my window and be like, oh, I'm gonna get a picture of that bird, but that would be kind of inappropriate in the given moment. So how do we focus on behaviorally relevant stimuli and ignore irrelevant stimuli? That's a question that my lab has been asking for years. I've been studying that question for over 20 years. We have some answers, and we end up every answer generating more questions.
Yeah,
It's a really
Andy,
great topic to explore.
what
Yeah, go ahead.
flexibility is also important in all of this, right? You mentioned the TSA sort of baggage checkers and figuring they have to figure out a system to identify what's relevant and not, to be efficient. But at a certain moment, maybe they have to change that sort of schema, right?
Absolutely, yep. So one of the things that we study is called task switching, where let's say the simplest version of task switching is, let's say I give you a digit between 1 and 9. So let's say it's the number 4. And I tell you there's 2 different tasks you can perform on that 4. One is judge if that 4 is even or odd, and you would answer even. The others, I could say, tell me if it's less than or greater than 5. So just say, is it low or high? In that case, you would say low. And this replicates so many types of things we do in the real world. If you're standing in front of a sink, in one moment, the task you could be performing is opening and closing the faucet, or brushing your teeth, or washing your hands. And you need to do the right task in the relevant moment. So this kind of lab-based task switching, where you see a digit and you have to judge is it low or high or odd or even, can be done such that you're switching back and forth between them. So in one moment I might say, all right, do the low-high judgment. And then in the next moment I might say, do the low-high judgment again, and then do it again. But then I'll say, do the odd-even judgment, and then do the odd-even, then low-high, and so on. And what we find when we're measuring how people respond with their reaction times, that is how quickly they respond, and their accuracy, and also how our brain responds. If we're measuring people's brain activity using neuroimaging approaches like functional MRI or electroencephalography, we can see that there is something different that you do when you have to switch to something new, that is update. So when you're trying to be flexible and change the current task that you're doing, like switching from low high to odd even, there's a whole set of cognitive machinery that has to get activated in order to make that happen. And humans are really great at doing it unless we have certain types of disorders. And we do it so much better than other animals. There are other animals that are incapable of modifying their behavior or being flexible in the face of the same stimulus.
Wow.
So, if you take a frog and you put a fly in front of that frog, it's always going to, shoot its tongue out and grab that fly in exactly the same way. If you try to train it to do any differently in that context, it's just not going to learn. But we can be flexible. And in order to be flexible, we have this cognitive machinery that we need to activate to override the task that we've just been doing and switch and be flexible and start a new task. Yep.
Amazing. Thank you, Andy. You attended, so you went to Rutgers for your BA and then Johns Hopkins for your PhD. What did you love most about college, Andy?
Freedom. I mean, for anyone who's in high school, that word has to resonate with you. There is so much that is amazing about being home with your family. During this time, it might be harder to recognize that. With the virus, maybe we have a little too much time at home, and that's an understatement. But going off to college, of course there was so much to learn in the classroom, but for me, it was just a whole world of freedom. And but beyond the freedom, I will say that the ability, the opportunity to meet people who were different from me was life-changing. It completely changed who I was as a person in a positive way. Whatever community you're growing up in, you've adapted to that community, and no matter how great it is, eventually your ability to grow in that community can be a little bit limited because you're not being challenged to think outside of the normal ways of thinking. So when I went off to college, I met people from different backgrounds who had different ideas, and if I didn't agree with them about something, I had to think about why I didn't agree. and we had to have discussions to reach common ground and understanding and be friends. Being friends with people who come from different backgrounds than you opens up a world of learning and understanding. So that was the biggest thing about college for me. Living in the dorm, which if that becomes possible for you guys who are listening, is an amazing experience. I would often stay up until 5 a.m., occasionally sleeping through classes, but don't tell anybody, don't tell my parents. I think I did okay in the long run, but we'd stay up till 5 a.m. just having philosophical discussions about things that we had never thought about before, but these were the big life questions. Going off to college lets you take a step back and think about the big life questions. What are you doing here? What are you doing here on this earth? What do you want to be doing? What do you want to get out of life? And then you can bring those thoughts into the classroom, and find your passions and pursue them.
Wonderful. Speaking of classrooms, how do you bring your research and your interest and the passion that you have into your classroom? What's like the trademark Andy Leber move in a classroom?
I don't know if they're Andy Leber moves, and if they are, they're probably pretty awkward to watch. But as a student, I actually struggled, I think, for a long time to sit and be attentive in a classroom. So it gave me a novel perspective when it came time for me to be the teacher. And I think I realized that, to me, listening to a series of facts couldn't have been more boring. And that's not for everybody. We're all different, right? But to me, it never worked. To me, I wanted to hear about a story. I wanted to understand why this is interesting, why it's important, why should I know this? And actually, what we know from cognitive psychological research is that we remember things when we can weave them into a story that has meaning. If an autobiographical memory, for instance, if we think about an episode and the fact is embedded in that episode, then we remember it so much better. So when I was a student, there was a class that changed my life. It was a psychology course called Conditioning and Learning. And what I noticed that the professor did was he didn't give us a list of facts to learn. He told us about the experiments that demonstrated those facts. So he brought us with him into the laboratory. In our minds, we would simulate just being in the laboratory, thinking about what the subjects in the experiments were exposed to and how they behaved and what it meant, and walking us through the logic of the experiments and how the knowledge was generated from those experiments was so exciting to me. So what I try to do in my classroom is teach the experiments, teach and talk about the concepts. Imagine that here we are at the forefront of knowledge, looking over the edge into the unknown. And we have to generate questions to get answers about what's in the unknown. And to me, it's not interesting to say, here's what the scientists say they found. To me, it's interesting to say, here's what the scientists did. Here's the experiment that they came up with. What do you guys think about that experiment? Is that a good way to address that question? Here's what the results were. How would you interpret those results? And I think that for the people who at least are like me and get bored only hearing about facts, it makes it more exciting to sort of have a front row seat to the scientific method, but also learn what the status of the field is. And I'll just say one other thing, which is that facts are somewhat of an illusion. At least in the world of science, we just have ideas that we have support for, that we probably believe are true, but we're always skeptical, always thinking about some new information that could undermine that fact. And we're always constantly trying to convince ourselves, is this truly proven? Do we need more evidence? And so on. So being a part of the scientific method, to me, is really exciting because you can always revise longstanding beliefs. And what scientists want to do is embrace the new information. We have to go in clear-eyed, and we have to be excited about things that might shift our paradigms and our ways of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I need your classroom, Andy, for sure. So when I'm feeling like I need inspiration and I need to kind of be invited along on a journey, you'll see me sitting somewhere there. What's next for you, Dr. Andy Leber?
Wow, what's next? Maybe a cup of coffee, though I don't drink that as much these days. So in the laboratory, there's a lot of stuff that we're excited about. We're very interested in how people choose the strategies that they choose, as I was talking about earlier. We want to understand how the mind implements strategies. So if I choose a certain strategy for searching for my car, if I choose the good strategy, if I'm really strategic in searching for cars, does that mean that I'm also strategic in searching for my keys? Does it also mean I'm strategic in how I save money? Does it mean I'm strategic in how I perform in college in terms of going to class and studying and doing, finding the best ways to study? And to what extent can we describe why people aren't always strategic? One of the things that we've been doing research on is our experience of effort and how that dissuades us from being strategic in life. So the simplest question is, or simplest scenario is, you're sitting on the couch and something boring comes on TV and you don't want to be watching it, but the remote is halfway across the room. So what's going to win out? Your desire to watch something more interesting, or your laziness to get off the couch and go get that remote and change the channel? So the feeling of that effort can define us in so many ways. If you feel like it's effortful just to think about what the best strategy is, you're not going to think about the best strategy. You're just going to do whatever. So that subjective feeling of effort can guide us so much. That's a big direction that we're pursuing in our lab. And just one other quick direction that I'll mention is, as director of the Center for Cognitive and Brain Sciences, we have a lot of exciting programs that as soon as we can get past this virus, that we're looking forward to launching. HumCog is one of our best programs that we're involved in. We have a variety of other programs for students that we have, but we're trying to connect cognitive science to real world things and talk to the greater community about what cognitive science is. So we have a series coming up, hopefully in the spring or sometime within the next year or so, on how cognitive science relates to climate change, which is a really important problem that our society is facing right now. So how our thinking about climate change can be wrong in some ways, how it can be modified, and how we can best communicate those types of information. So what can cognitive science contribute to the tackling of the climate change problem? And then we do some other fun things like our annual CogFest, where we have a variety of things like a poster session for students, and then a film event. So most recently this past February, in our film event, we watched the movie Arrival, and we had a linguist, an expert linguist. Her name is Professor Jessica Kuhn, who served as a consultant on that film. So she got to meet the cast and the director and everything, and help them write the script that best reflected what the cognitive science of language is. So she came and talked to us about those experiences and about her own research. And people asked her questions about the film after we all watched it together. We've done other films like Her, which is about a guy who falls in love with his operating system. So, cognitive science is really into questions about artificial intelligence. So for us, in terms of what's next, I'm really excited to continue steering the ship as best as I can for the Center for Cognitive and Brain Sciences to do more fun and exciting things.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, our co-directing of the Humanities and Cognitive Sciences High School and Summer Institute in many ways is all about making those connections that
Oh, yeah.
allow us to see everyday implications, right? Uh,
Absolutely.
so thank you, Dr. Andrew Leber, and thank you for being such an awesome colleague and for directing with me the Humanities and Cognitive Sciences High School Summer Institute. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frederick Aldama. It's been amazing to work with you. You are an amazing director of this fantastic program that we have. And I just want to say to the students who will be joining us, I am so excited to meet you. Every experience I've had with HumCog has been the highlight of my month or more. And I think about it all the time, about meeting these bright, young, passionate minds who want to talk about the world and how it relates to humanities and cognitive science. And it's such a fun series. I think Frederick and our staff have done such a great job at setting it up in a novel format this year. I think that it's going to be so fantastic. So I look forward to meeting you all, and thanks so much for the opportunity to participate.